as Isa has already mentioned, this session, just like the previous working session, will first have a 45 minutes presentation by our subject matter expert, and then it will be followed by a Q&A session. So first I'll introduce Dr. Petr Topychkanov, who is an associate senior researcher in the Weapons of Mass Destruction program of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and a senior researcher at the section for non-proliferation and arms limitation of the Primakov National Research Institute of World Economy and International Relations of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Also, he is a part-time scholar in the Institute of Oriental Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences and an expert of the Russian International Affairs Council. Dr. Petr works on issues related to nuclear non-proliferation, disarmament, arms control, and the impact of new technologies on strategic stability. And today for this session, he'll be speaking on emerging technologies and deterrence. So without further ado, it's over to you, Dr. Topychkanov.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful for inviting me to join today's conversation. Of course, I would hope to see everybody in person at a more convenient time and opportunity. I hope that restrictions and complications related to the most recent events, including the COVID-19, will be overcome quite soon. When I was asked to have a talk on the emerging technologies issue and deterrence, and when I started preparing my presentation today, for myself, as usual, for researchers and scholars, I had many questions. Because we have many questions about every part of this title. And the first thing is about emerging. If you look into the scientific literature, the name emerging was in use for years and decades in the context of military technological developments. And it also substituted by other terms such as advanced, such as new technologies. And sometimes we could see that these technologies and these discussions are mostly about the same bunch of technologies, such as ballistic missile defense, different types and different directions of developing missile technologies, for instance, cruise missiles. It's about the use of computing in the areas of command and control, intelligence, radars and communications, and integration of information environment for commanding and signaling of forces, and so on and so forth. And sometimes when we are discussing, and when we are following the discussions, emerging remains a description for the same, even sometimes almost the same level of technological development. As a good example is ballistic missile defense. Because no country in the world could say that, well, now we achieved the level of advances in the area of ballistic missile defense that allow us to be satisfied with this level in preventing massive ballistic and cruise missile attacks from potential adversaries, including it's not relevant for the United States, it's not relevant for Israel, it's not relevant for Russia or for India, China, and Pakistan. So The question now, why and what do we mean under the emerging? What these technologies allow in the area of military developments, and most importantly in the area of strategic weapons. And then I will build a bridge between emerging technologies and deterrence, nuclear deterrence. So emerging technologies allows improving intelligence, surveillance, integration of different aspects of command and control, communications, precision of weapons, survivability, and allows exploring new domains for military activities, such as cyber domain and outer space, but also it allows using traditional environment with less capabilities involved and with higher effective results for, after using the military equipment and during the military activities. So we have a lot of things that I just mentioned. And the question is, why and how these technologies allow us to achieve the goals that I mentioned. And there are pluses and minuses, there are obstacles and achievements. And of course, the current crisis, the current war happening on the Ukrainian soil represented some of these aspects when the sides involved stated using new technologies, new capabilities, new information support, but at the same time, if you follow these military activities, you could see that quite often the achievements on the ground are possible due to use of traditional weapons and traditional tactics and strategies, including heavy military, tanks, artillery, and sometimes without information support, and so on. So let me try to put these different aspects on the different in different boxes. So intelligence and intelligence operation and information support of military activities. Yes, it's a well-known fact that new technologies, emerging technologies allowed developing unmanned vehicles for air, ground, undersea and sea operations. And this equipment allowed to having a better understanding of the movements on the other side, and allowed to detect changes on the enemy's side precisely, timely, and send this information to the commander centers and back to the troops just to act properly in reaction to these movements. So it's a perfect picture. It's a perfect picture described in many scholar articles. But then what we see in a real situation? In a real situation, the combat environment, it's an environment overcrowded by ways, by communications between the troops, commander centers, and also overcrowded by electronic warfare, preventing other side from using their capabilities, including drones, effectively. And what the events in Ukraine demonstrated that not necessarily often, it's difficult to assess at this stage, but it happened already when electronic warfare downed the capabilities and drones by the side, launched by the side, used this electronic warfare. So it was like a friendly fire with electronic warfare against national drones, and it didn't allow to use effectively surveillance and information networks in the combat situation. Even worse, during and because of overcrowded by electronic warfare and signals, the troops couldn't use effectively their communications. So communications is one of the most complicated and difficult things during the combat activities. And it does matter in different contexts, in the strategic context, but also on the tactical level. I just want to give an example just as an illustration how important it is during at the strategic level. Because just imagine a nuclear exchange and nuclear escalation between nuclear weapon states involved in also in a conventional exchanges and conventional war with each other. And after or during this exchange, the command centers want to send a signal to a submarine in ocean to launch a nuclear retaliation against an aggressor. But the question is about avoiding detection by the enemy of command centers, not to be intercepted this message by the enemy's intelligence, and also to secure that this nuclear submarine receives that message, and also this submarine remains in secrecy and it's not detected by anti-submarine warfare, and it's for the submarine it's possible to perform this strategic mission. So a lot of complications, a lot of problems, and it should be resolved in a very limited period of time, effectively, and and it should be, how to say, it should be secured. So the commanders, they should know that they should rely on these communications during the combat time. And now we are back to the tactical level performed and demonstrated by the events in Ukraine. When, unfortunately for the troops, they had to use mobile phones to reach each other and to reach commanders to get commands and to report about their achievements and the developments on the ground. Because the military communications didn't work due to technical reasons. Of course, it's a long conversation. Why? We don't know at this stage. There are some rumors, there are some speculations. I'm not here to assess these speculations. But the example, as it is, the troops had used time to time their mobile phones, cell phones, to substitute dysfunctional military communications. Then another thing is about the integration. So the idea that many countries already performed before the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, that there should be an integrated command center with multiple sources of intelligence information supporting this, with robust communications between commanders, commander-in-chief, and troops on the ground, and sensors in different domains, including satellites. And this network should allow the armed forces to react timely to military challenges, to have a proper picture of what is happening, and also, and it was very important, to use their troops effectively, not send more troops they have and they should have to use, and just to find a proper balance, a proper composition of the troops involved in the military operations. And this system, supported by the artificial intelligence and machine learning achievements achieved in the most recent years, it's like a smart armed forces, a smart system. However, if we are back to the current situation, including in Ukraine, we could see how this. So it's like example, like in Instagram, it's the most quite often thing, Instagram versus reality. And when we see what is happening on the ground and about the reality, we could see that probably there are some very serious problems how the system works. Because yes, Russia built the central information network integrated with all troops and connected to sensors in outer space, with covering all the armed forces and supported by other sources of intelligence and so on and so forth. And the idea was that based on that, it was possible just to send commands to the troops in Ukraine, and commanders in Moscow would understand clearly what was happening on the ground. However, what we could see that the system probably didn't work, at least on the Russian side, because Russian generals had to travel again and again to the battlefield to command the troops, to synchronize their activities, to communicate between the logistic and offense operations. And so it was like they had to play a coordinator role, because the central information system turned to be not well prepared, probably it's my speculation, probably I'm wrong, but it looked like these generals and top commanders, they had to substitute weaknesses of the central information center, system of the armed forces. And then what we could see that the armed forces witnessed, the Russian armed forces witnessed some problems with logistics, with supplies. And again, it happened because of human aspects and dimension. And we could see that humans remained in the center of this military operation because the central information system didn't work perfectly. So we see what is the perfect picture and what is the reality, how the emerging technologies face things on the ground. Another issue already proved and demonstrated in the events in Ukraine. It's a well-known fact that integration of information, intelligence, surveillance, and high precision allow using weapons precisely against military targets and avoiding high casualties among peaceful people not involved in the military operations. What we know for sure that just for example, that in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and now in Ukraine, there was a very active use of high precision weapons. And in each case, we could see wrong strikes, wrong attacks, and casualties among peaceful people, civilian people. And then the most recent case, why I use this example again and again, because we could see this right now very well due to the ongoing events between Russia and Ukraine, that Russia uses high precision weapons, air-launched, sea-launched, and some of them are dual capable. It means that they can deliver conventional warheads and nuclear warheads. And what we can see, even if targets were military, we don't know, of course, it's a question about understanding the situation, and we don't have a full picture. But unfortunately, every strike, or at least not necessarily every, but many strikes performed by high precision weapons of Russia caused casualties among civilians, not being in the military installations, not being inside of military targets. They were left and stayed outside of this. So it means that high precision weapons, so there are many questions. Why? And I don't know and don't have an answer for you right now, but probably it's a technical thing. It's a technical mistake. Probably it's a wrong intelligence. Because what we know from the previous examples of using, for instance, drones or high precision weapons in Iraq and Afghanistan, sometimes the reason was their own intelligence. And it could be possible as well in Ukraine. And it again is a question about how connected high precision with the data and with the guidance, with the intelligence support. Because it's not just about having a high precision weapon, it's also about delivering this weapon, targeting, properly targeting, timely performing a strike to avoid civilian casualties. And what we can see, it's not necessarily the case. And this is a question, you know, in the most recent years, there is a discussion about high precision and intelligence support and advanced technologies allowing using cruise missiles and high precision weaponry to deliver low yield nuclear warheads and tactical nuclear warheads to target strategic targets and to target the sites on strategic distances, ranges. So again, it's a perfect picture. We have a strategic delivery system. We have a high precision based on sensors, communications, based on intelligence with multiple sources, and so on and so forth. And we have a low yield warhead, a nuclear warhead, that could target, for instance, a command center. But by example of Ukraine most recently, and the most massive example, but also previous examples in Iraq and Afghanistan, we could see that, well, it's a quite high possibility that it might be a wrong target, might be a wrong attack. And here we have a very important thing, that with the advances achieved in offensive weapons, of course, there are very significant achievements in offensive weapons and counterintelligence and intelligence against an offender. And from this point of view, what we can see that there is a growing possibilities for survivability of weapons. There is a growing possibility for more mobile platforms for nuclear weapons, more mobile and network-based command and control of the armed forces. And from this point of view, targeting a central command installation facility wouldn't mean that the enemy force would lose its ability to protect itself, to defend, to perform military operations. And again, also there are growing possibilities for having counter anti-electronic warfare, cyber counter operations, poisoning data, creating deep fakes, creating wrong targets for the enemy that would make this enemy spending its high precision weapons on the wrong targets or on the targets without a significant military role in the armed operations. And here I'm back to the question in the title of the event about deterrence. I described the weaknesses and strong sides of the advanced or emerging technologies. And now the question is, what we want to deter with these advances and weaknesses? If we are discussing a traditional aggression with conventional weapons and nuclear weapons, probably, yes, this role is here, but my take on this would be that this role of nuclear weapons didn't change a lot due to the advanced technologies, due to emerging technologies. Of course, it depends. It depends on the country, on the region, on the case. For instance, if we are discussing two countries with large nuclear weapons arsenals, such as Russia and the United States, these advanced technologies don't change a lot because neither of them is capable to state that all the advances this side might have would allow this first side to perform a first strike and remove the possibility of any kind of retaliation that could cause the unacceptable damage. This is a very important thing, that ballistic missile defense, that the United States invested a lot, all the intelligence, electronic warfare, all the communication systems and survivability improved due to the emerging technologies and advances in the military weapons. They wouldn't allow the United States to say, well, now we know for sure that Russia wouldn't have a chance to have a retaliation strike against Russia, and Russia wouldn't have a chance to perform unacceptable damage. And unfortunately for the United States, unfortunately for the nuclear deterrence relations, it's not possible even to say in the case of the deterrence relations between Russia and North Korea, or sorry, between the United States and North Korea. It's not possible to say the same in the case of the United States and China. Even in that cases, when the arsenals are quite different, other side would have a possibility to have a retaliation and to cause an unacceptable damage against the United States. But if we have a discussion, for instance, about the relations, let's say, Russia and Ukraine, just imagine, Ukraine has a dozen of nuclear weapons, nuclear warheads, and delivery systems. And would it be an obstacle for Russia before starting this military operation against Ukraine? I would doubt about that. Russia already demonstrated that, the Russian leadership, that somehow it can tolerate high casualties in Ukraine, but also casualties among the Russian armed forces, and also the damages caused to the towns near the border with Ukraine. So, and I have no answer to this question. What does it mean for Russia to feel that that damage would be unacceptable for my country? I have no question. I do remember the statement by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who once mentioned that, well, we have a system of command and control of the Russian force, of the nuclear arsenal, and it means that even if our enemy would have a chance to have a first strike against Russia, and this first strike would kill our commanders and elite, we would go to a paradise, but we would have a chance to retaliate and to destroy that country totally. So this statement is quite dangerous, because it's a logic that there is no debate about what does it mean to have acceptable or unacceptable damage. This threat, this statement indicated that for a country, in that case, it was stated by Vladimir Putin, so it means in Russia, the idea of unacceptable damage might be quite different from the idea popular for instance, the United States or in Europe. And so it means that there is no balance between this feeling, what is acceptable, what is non-acceptable. So from this point of view, the idea that due to the advanced technologies, emerging technologies, for instance, the United States has a chance to eliminate significant part of the Russian nuclear arsenal, and the ballistic missile defense, just, I guess, just imagine, would be able to intercept a significant part of remaining nuclear warheads from Russia. It doesn't mean that the United States would be able to secure that no one of the nuclear warheads of Russia wouldn't reach the territory of the United States or its allies in NATO and in European countries. So it means that the question of deterrence, for me, probably I'm quite conservative in this way, remains quite traditional in many countries, because nuclear weapons remain a traditional way to deter massive conventional, but also nuclear attacks. Advanced technologies, they allow to build a better deterrence, but deterrence remains the same policy. However, and this is a big question, I know that my time is out, but however, there is a question and there is a debate, including in Russia and in Western countries and other countries and in your countries as well, that debate about the rules, different rules for nuclear weapons. And the role not only as an instrument of deterrence, but also as an instrument of war fighting. I already covered that when describing high precision and using strategic delivery systems for delivering low yield warheads and tactical weapons. And now I have no answer for the question about how these emerging technologies are important in moving forward this debate in creating nuclear weapons or recreating nuclear weapons as a war fighting capabilities. I have no answer for you, but based on the experience and examples I already listed before, I can say that so far, these emerging technologies, from my point of view, are not the game changers to change immediately the role of nuclear weapons from a deterrence instrument to a war fighting tool. And the emerging technologies don't mean the change of a traditional policy, at least now. What would happen in 10 years, it's very difficult to predict. Thank you so much for your attention. I will be very happy to discuss these issues and to listen to your opinions and the reaction on these initial thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Topychkanov. This was a very, very interesting, a very thought-provoking presentation, and even I have like a list of things to ask you and actually to learn more from you on these issues. But first, we'll open the floor for our participants to ask any questions. Please use the raise hand feature to indicate that you want to ask a question, and please do introduce yourself before asking the questions. Okay, Faraz, I see you have your raised hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Haleema, for letting me ask the question. My name is Faraz. I'm coordinating this workshop with Session2. My question for Dr. Peter was that you mentioned how the data integration with the high precision weapons is very important in actually allowing them to hit the targets they want to be hitting. So, and that could have been one of the reasons why Russia faced some civilian casualties in the high precision weapons it used in Ukraine. So regarding the data integration with these emerging technologies or advancements in conventional technologies, how important is that factor in the anti-ballistic missile defenses that Russia is producing, such as the S-400 or the newer iteration, the S-500? So if data integration may be a problem for Russia, as seen in Ukraine with its high precision missiles, will these defense systems, the ABMs, be able to perform their marketed features that it says that it performs? So that's my question. Thank you.
May I answer the question now? Or,
yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Faraz, for this question. I think that you touched a big question. To be honest, it's a huge question. First of all, let me start with describing the S-400. So, first of all, of course, we all know that this system was developed from the air defense system. So it wasn't initially designed as a ballistic missile defense system. But then the idea was in Russia to expand its capabilities and to build a system that target also warheads and targets such as cruise missiles, and to play an anti-ballistic role. And also the idea was that if needed, it could target low orbit satellites. So again, the ideal picture was to build a universal system responding to any potential air threat. However, this is an ideal picture. We don't know how successful Russia was in creating this. It's not dependent only on the interceptor, but also, of course, it depends on the engine, on propulsion system, on precision, but also it's important about information support, so surveillance, information, intelligence, radars on the ground, and sensors in space or on AWACS should react immediately and supply information to the deployed S4 or 500, it depends on in future, 600 and so on. But also it's important, the question is important not only about how successful Russia was, but also the question is important about what is the export version. What kind of interceptor, what kind of information support, how these systems could be integrated in other armed forces information network. For instance, and this is, for me, this is one of the questions I have for myself about how, for instance, S-400 is integrated in the information network in Turkey or in India, in the countries having very strong defense cooperation with NATO countries and above all with the United States. For instance, the question about dividing and detecting enemy and friendly aircrafts and targets in a very short period of time. How it's possible to build and to perform this division of targets, friendly and enemy, without compromising secret information related to that aircraft designs to Russia and about S400 design, how to avoid transferring this information to native countries. So it's a technological, but also it's about trust, it's about confidence, it's about innovative approaches. My concern is that if, for instance, a country decides to build an integrated system based on information surveillance GPS support from the United States, it would have to use S400 in isolation from that information network. Another question is about the role of S400. It doesn't build a dome over the huge regions. It's effective in protecting concrete facilities, concrete installations. And that is why it's the most effective in targeting threats, incoming threats, in reasonable distances from these facilities. And it means a lot. But also it means that if, for instance, and it was an example, and probably it was an example, we don't know precisely the picture, but it could happen in Ukraine, and it could happen also in other cases, such as the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan years ago. The idea is that radars and air defense is deployed, and they could see multiple targets, and in a very short amount of time, it's not possible to divide real threat from for instance, drones. It could be simple, a very cheap drones, but these drones could create a very complicated picture for the air defense and ballistic missile defense. It wouldn't allow to avoid that threat is real, and threat becomes a real strike against this installation protected by the air defense. I don't know exactly what happened, but there are speculations that something similar could lead to the end of the Russian flagship Moskva. They could have multiple threats and couldn't detect or couldn't react to a real threat timely to avoid attack that led to its downing end of its mission. So thank you. I hope that I responded to your question. But again, this is a huge question, and it's possible to discuss this much longer than I responded to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You did address the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. Okay, so I have next on my list, Imran. Imran, please go ahead, unmute yourself, and please also switch on your video.
Hello, I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I'm Imran Abbas, Assistant Professor, Department of Politics and International Relations, University of Sargodha. So my question to Dr. Peter is, every new system that is, getting maturity in the forces, has below par performance as compared to the laboratory and laboratory testing and the simulation available for that weapon system. And then the adversary may have the disruptive technologies available. So in that case, if a bigger power is using those modern weapon systems, but it get disrupted, don't you think that it will hurt the pride of that bigger power, and then it will switch to a more disproportionate use of force to achieve its strategic objectives? So that's the one part of my question. If I'm allowed to have a second question.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Sure. And secondly, you talk about S-400 system. So S-400 system is changing the balance within the South Asian strategic stability, but the S-400 system has a dual role. It's not just a defensive weapon system, it can be used as an offensive weapon system. So in that case, when the technological parity is roundabout closer, the adversary will have to initiate the military engagements at a higher pitch in order to be able to neutralize the offensive role of, for example, like Pakistan, if it knows that India has an operational S-400 system going on. So we have to begin the very military engagements at a higher note. So don't you think that this will eventually add up to the confusion of the maintaining the nuclear deterrence and the stability within the South Asian context? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Imran. I think that, the first question, the second question, they deal with the problems not necessarily highlighted by emerging technologies. Even before and even beyond the context of emerging technologies, the cases that you described perfectly, they could happen. For instance, if a smaller country or a weaker country has an effective military operation against a stronger power, of course, for the later it would be accumulation. It depends. It depends on what are the goals and what they want to achieve in these exchanges. So, of course, there is an emotional thing. And we have to think about the concrete contexts here. Probably, I don't know exactly what is your focus in your question was, what it was on the relations between, for instance, India and China, India and Pakistan, China, or the United States. But for me, the question is that if, and it was already stated, if there is a violence, if there is an offense, even with smaller arsenals, and it doesn't mean that was a smaller country more effective and successful in its military operation or less successful. It's already an escalation. It's already use of force. And the same fact that a smaller country used force against a bigger country, the same fact is already the reason for the bigger country to use the whole menu of capabilities against the offender. So from this point of view, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how and what kind of capabilities a small country use. It's like a red line after which the situation could be escalated further. However, what I want to say, you mentioned and you rightly highlighted the role of disruptive technologies. And here we are entering a huge unknown about what would happen, what are actual scenarios. Because if a country, a smaller country, a weaker country, used effectively cyber means against civilian infrastructure, such as transport infrastructure or energy infrastructure or financial system, would it be detected, or first of all, would it be possible for the victim to detect timely the source of this attack, and then would it be a good reason for the victim to respond with using the full menu of forces? Of course, there is a doctrine, for instance, in the United States, stating that the United States secures the right to respond to a cyber attack. And there is also the same mentioned by the French nuclear doctrine. So it's possible, but this is a document, this is a political statement. And we don't know exactly what would happen if it happens in real, because even it depends on the scale, it depends on everything. The very important thing, when an offender uses a disruptive technology, there are two options for the attacker. The first option is to declare, yes, that it's my role, it was my mission, and I was successful, and the goal was that, and please stop doing that. So it would be like a traditional military use of force, but in cyber area, without actual firing, without missiles, and so on and so forth. Another option would be to keep it to refuse to take responsibility, just to test the weaknesses, just to achieve some kind of goals, but without declaring its own responsibility. And it depends. In the former case, I do believe that the victim would have the right to respond in any possible way as it would believe, including by the military use of force. In the second case, it depends. And it would be, of course, a calculation about what would mean to use the full instrumentarium, what could be other options, probably to respond on a cyber attack with all cyber attacks and or sanctions and so on. So there are more space for multiple options in the second case. As for your second question about S-400 and its role as an offensive weapon, because you mentioned a very precise case, I do think that it's a question about confidence building measures, not necessarily between India and Pakistan, but mostly between Pakistan and Russia, and India and Russia, to secure that the Russian-Indian cooperation on S-400 doesn't cover offensive weapons for this platform. And this is the first. The second thing is, what Russia already demonstrated in Ukraine, that it's very expensive and it's quite difficult to produce and to supply sufficient number of missiles, including high precision missiles, for launches during this highly active combat actions in Ukraine. And this is an example, a visible example, that if, for instance, just imagine, I guess it's not the case, I believe it's not the case now, but just imagine that India wants to have offensive weapons for S-400 launcher. I have very doubts about it, to be honest. But just imagine, then it means that India has few launchers and would need to have multiple rockets, for quite expensive. And if Pakistan is effective to target that launches, it would mean that India would waste all these rockets without launchers to launch these rockets. And they would be quite expensive. So for me, this argument is about effectiveness of having launches on S-400 or similar systems. Just it's not the case. That is why it reminds me about the debate existed between Russia and NATO about, it's my dog, I'm sorry, about using offensive weapons from ballistic missile defense installations in Europe. And the response from NATO was it wouldn't be effective for NATO to deploy offensive weapons in a proximity to the Russian territory when Russia could target these installations easily with high precision. And it was an argument explaining why NATO wouldn't be interested in deploying offensive weapons on ballistic missile defense installations in Europe. Probably these arguments works perfectly in the case of India and Pakistan as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Topychkanov. Okay, Ms. Adila, you have the floor now.
Assalamu alaikum and good. My name is Adila Ahmed and I did my MPhil from Qaid-e-Azam University in Defense and Strategic Studies, Islamabad, and now I am pursuing PhD from University of Lahore. So my question is that as student of international relations, we really find difficulty as the process is very complex when we integrate emerging technology with deterrence, right? So I think the objective of this session is as well to more simplify it. So my question is particularly, sir, that the key objective of deterrence is to use ways and means to produce deterrence, right? So what is your understanding and what is your views about the cross-domain deterrence theoretical model? So how you view it, the model of cross-domain deterrence has complexity and how to use it effectively, and do you believe that cross-domain deterrence gives new tools to apply to get deterrence works, and how you crack it, and particularly when we studied South Asian strategic environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you a lot for your question. It's again, it's not an easy question. It's not an easy question because it depends on what kind of deterrence do we mean. If it's about a nuclear deterrence, it would mean use of nuclear forces deterring, and then depending on the nuclear doctrine, deterring what? Deterring use of nuclear weapons or deterring use of weapons of mass destruction, including biological and chemical, deterring a massive conventional or limited conventional attack, or deterring other things as a cyber attack and terrorist attacks. I want to recall you again the French nuclear doctrine, even where there is a highlight that that doctrine covers even the risks of terrorist attacks against France. So for me, of course, it's difficult to imagine how nuclear weapons could deter terrorist attacks, but it depends. But in general, nuclear weapons plays a deterrent role against any kind of aggression. And here, this is the question, is about what do we want from this situation? There are different ways. The first way is to build a multi-domain deterrence system where you have conventional weapons, cyber means, weapons, nuclear weapons, and new technological advances, allowing you to deter, it depends on what kind of the challenge you have, but the system would allow you to use effectively your capabilities, not necessarily nuclear, to deter other side from attacking you. There is another approach that let's believe that focus on nuclear deterrence, because nuclear weapons should play the role in a very limited context. Sole purpose mission of nuclear weapons, where the nuclear weapons should deter the attacks with weapons of mass destruction or with the nuclear weapons. And here we are moving away from this multi-domain approach. And it depends. What is the context of this discussion? If this is a discussion about building some kind of context, building measures, nuclear arms control, I believe, my personal belief is, I am ready to discuss this later if there is a question. My belief is that it's better to focus on nuclear deterrence against aggressions with nuclear weapons and aggressions with weapons of mass destruction. Because here we have the rules, here we have a very clear practices, and already there is some kind of experience that could be developed, having in mind the most recent political events and difficulties in international relations. But if we are discussing challenges for the country and how to develop its own capabilities and how to integrate, as you mentioned, advanced technologies into the military system, then of course we have to think about multi-domain deterrence. And of course it's very complicated to build any kind of context building measures or arms control regime based on multi-domain deterrence conversation. But at least it's possible based on that concept to think how to build an effective system and how to use effectively the capabilities and resources of a country, especially against multiple challenges, against stronger opponent, and so on. I hope I responded to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Shayan, you can ask your question now.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So Dr. Peter, thank you for the lecture, first of all. And my question was in regards of the Russia-Ukraine war. If you look at the new and emerging technologies that could have been used and were used, we've seen some examples. So Russia used hypersonic missiles. Ukraine supposedly employed AI drones against Russia. But on the large scale, in terms of particularly AI and cyber warfare, we haven't really seen a very regular use by either side. So even though in recent years states like Israel have really used AI and cyber warfare in a military domain, so do you think the reason that they haven't been used in the Russia-Ukraine war is because of a lack of capability, or is it more of a tactical choice by both sides? And also on the larger scale of contemporary warfare, how long do you think we can if we focus on AI especially, how long do you think we have to wait before we really see AI become a regular feature on the battleground? Thank you.
Thank you so much for both questions. Because the artificial intelligence and machine learning, they are part of command and control and communications. The areas very difficult to touch, to understand, and there are a lot of aspects in this area classified. Well, but we don't know exactly what is in use currently in the crisis in Ukraine. We don't understand. But what we do understand is that both sides heavily use drones between them. Also, Russia used high precision weapons. Of course, I mentioned the aspects, how it was used, but it was stated that Russia used Caliber missiles, cruise missiles. Russia launched attacks from submarines, from fleet, from air-launched missiles. And also, before the beginning of invasion, there was a huge cyber attack against Ukraine. Also, of course, we don't know, and of course, it's a question about the responsibility, who is responsible. Of course, the Ukrainian officials believe that it's a Russian responsibility. We don't know. We know very well the question of attribution of cyber attacks. It's a big issue, and of course, there will be sufficient time for Ukraine to provide support for this accusation. But also, what we do know that in Ukraine, even the artillery, it uses mobile system of distributing targets between artillery units. So it's like artillery or Uber, when an operator with an installation receives a list of targets, and then he or she indicates that I would take this one. And other operators would say, well, I would take this one and another one. And so it's like a very quick and rapid, and probably it's a simple artificial intelligence. So it's not about a machine learning in the way it's developed, for instance, in self-driving cars. It's not so complicated. And you could see, and you could find video records about the drones intercepted or just grounded in Ukraine. And you could see that it's a simple system. But this is exactly the question, that if we have what we have in Ukraine, war between regular armies with massive use of weapons, the question isn't about using expensive systems. The question about multiple platforms that can be substituted, and that country with a smaller budget can build multiple ones. And for Russia, the question is even more complicated. Under heavy sanctions, how to reproduce more and more drones using what it could take on the market, on the international market, and or something that Russia could build inside Russia with limited resources. So it's about a cheaper thing, and it's about how to say using old school artificial intelligence. Sometimes we use this term, or something like a primitive artificial intelligence without complicated algorithms of machine learning. However, I believe that, and it's not only about Russia, it's not only about Ukraine, it's about many countries observing right now the events in Ukraine. They use the situation, they use satellites data, including available from open sources, to collect, to analyze a huge amount of data about this war to adapt their own troops, strategies, tactics in response to that experience. And by the way, it was also reported, of course, it's difficult to prove, it's difficult to just to provide you with confirmation of this information. But it was mentioned that the countries supported Ukraine. They use open and closed data, and they use artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to work with this data. And based on that data, they provide Ukraine with timely information about where Russia moves troops, storages, munitions, where Russia even plans to deploy or could plan to deploy its command centers or its launchers of missiles. So it means that it's already here. It's already integrated. Of course, it's difficult to assess the scale of integration, but I believe that this conflict catched the trend, and the trend will be developed not only in Russia and Ukraine after the crisis, but based on this experience by third countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. And I just want to add with regards to, this whole issue of how to respond to a cyber attack. And like you pointed out, attribution is a huge challenge with regards to cyber attack. And also, in addition to attribution being a challenge, the other issue is of a proportional response. So what would constitute a proportional response? Would it be a cyber attack on the state which has which has in the first place launched the cyber attack? And the other thing is whether a proportional response can also be justified in case of a kinetic attack, or perhaps a mix of a cyber and a kinetic attack. So it's a huge challenge in how to deal with this whole situation with regards to cyber warfare. So I have now Jamal on my list. Please go ahead, Jamal.
Thanks, ma'am. My name is Jamal Nasir, and I am a student of strategic studies. Thanks, Mr. Peter, for enlightening us on the subject. Technology always been a driver for human progress as well as destruction of human. My question is that in the present era of emerging technologies, what is the fate of second strike capability? In the presence of high performance sensors, availability of intelligence reconnaissance system, do you think the survivability of second strike platforms is really matters? And my question is that in this era of emerging technologies, what is the fate and validity of nuclear first no use doctrines? My second question is that misinformation or fake news is a problem, and it also hampers deterrence stability. Like in case of US invasion to the Iraq, we saw that allies invaded smaller country, but in case of two belligerents which are armed with nuclear weapons, what would be the effects of misinformation in case of two belligerents having nuclear power? Please.
Thank you so much for two complicated questions. The first thing is about the fate of retaliation and the first strike capabilities and possibilities. So in the studies that in which I participated, we see and there were some authors probably from the Today room, there was a discussion and there was an opinion that there is a possibility that emerging technologies could stimulate the first strike doctrines. The idea was that because of the emerging technologies, a better intelligence, better surveillance, and most advanced missile defenses, an attacker might detect all the needed targets. It could believe that its conventional and nuclear weapons could overcome the enemy's missile defense, and it could use effective instruments such as cruise missiles and hypersonic weapons, and from this point of view, the attacker could believe that it would be able to suppress all the most part of the enemy nuclear weapons, and the remaining part would be intercepted by the advanced ballistic missile defense. As for the behavior of the weaker part, again, it could stimulate the first strike doctrine because, for instance, a smaller country could see that a stronger neighbor or a stronger adversary could achieve significant advances in conventional weapons, and its conventional weapons could play strategic missions with precisely targeting nuclear weapons in a small country, and it would make a smaller country more nervous, and it would mean that the smaller country would believe that the most effective way to respond to this growing threat would be to rely on the first strike doctrine. It's what I just described. It was an academic exercise, but my strong belief is that yes, the country might send any message about its own nuclear doctrine. First strike, second strike, no first strike. However, it's more about the political document. It's more about the political message that that country wishes to send to others, and most importantly, to potential adversaries. But at the same time, the first strike, the actual use of nuclear weapon, it's a red line that would change everything. And then we would enter the escalation scenarios. It's very hard to predict. It's very hard to understand the scenarios. That is why I prefer to divide these discussions from understanding operational plans and actual possibilities on the ground. Because I do believe that, of course, the message from the country could be about the first strike. But just let me bring again the example of Ukraine to this conversation. Several times during this crisis, the Russian side repeated again and again the threat of using the last resort weapons against NATO, against the West, including there were some crazy voices in Russian mass media advocating for strikes against different countries in the West and so on and so forth. However, at the same time, the Russian leadership perfectly understands that the nuclear weapon of Russia is effective until Russia uses it as a nuclear deterrence instrument. because it allows Russia to prevent NATO enter the Ukrainian territory. It prevents Russia, it prevents NATO from being part of active combat actions in Ukraine against Russia. And at the same time, in Russia, people, responsible people, understand very well that if Russia uses nuclear weapons against targets in Ukraine and Europe, it would change everything. After that, there would be no red lines, there would be no reasons for NATO not to be part of this aggression, not to be part of this war and combat actions in Ukraine or against Russia in any other parts. This is a very good example that the first strike doctrine, yes, Russia has the first strike doctrine, that this doctrine doesn't have anything related to the actual tension between Russia and the West, Russia's war with Ukraine. That is why I would say that I think that we should take this different. And as for your question about the retaliation capabilities, probably I wasn't clear in my first take, but I believe that at this stage, it's hard to consider the advances in emerging technologies as a game changer for nuclear deterrence capabilities. In any case, would it be Russia, United States, UK, France, India, Pakistan, China, North Korea, in any case, other side would have a chance to secure a retaliation capability against a stronger adversary. That is why at this stage, probably it's too early to say that now the retaliation capabilities were compromised by advances in emerging technology. But again, probably I'm too conservative. As for the fake news, I would look at this. Let me be short because I do see other raised hands, and my answers to every perfect questions are too long. I'm sorry for that. I apologize for that. But let me take this question in two parts. The first part is about just imagine an escalation scenario between two sides. And one of them decides to use fake news and just creating misinformation. So the question is about what is the reason? The first possible reason for that is to secure, to protect its own capabilities. For instance, just imagine that an attacked side would say that our capabilities, our storages with our strategic weapons are fully destroyed by the enemy's attacks. And the attacker, if it doesn't have other sources of information, say, we are successful enough to eliminate this kind of capabilities. But after that, the victim would use these capabilities against the aggressor, and it would play, this fake news would play a protecting role for the victim of this aggression. There are many other similar scenarios, and we could see these similar scenarios just in the event happening in Ukraine, where both sides use fake news, misinformation, propaganda to protect their own capabilities or to demonstrate other sides' weaknesses and inabilities and so on, and to play against each other in the international mass media and to put pressure on the international community to support each other against each other. So it's a huge thing. Another question is about fake news as a provoking tool for the nuclear escalation. And this is a very hard to imagine actual scenario. I do remember we had these discussions a few years ago, probably with some participants in that room. And I do remember there was an argument against that scenario, that who would be interested in provoking a nuclear escalation with deep fakes, or with fake news, or with something like that. Of course, there might be countries interested in provoking a conventional conflict, a local escalation with use of force, border tension, political tension, economical disruption, and so on and so forth. But we are discussing a nuclear escalation that would change everything and would change people's life and would destroy people's lives with different ideological, religious, political, and so on backgrounds. Of course, there was an idea that it might be a terrorist, but I do remember again the opinion very skeptical about it, because terrorists might have quite limited regional and local agendas, and they wouldn't be interested in destroying everything. Even if we do remember the cases of using weapons of mass destruction by some terrorists in the past, even that cases, they were very local, not connected to the agenda to destroy everything. Of course, in that case, I'm recalling the use of chemical nerve agent by the Japanese sect Aum Shinrikyo, and also the use of nuclear threat for the nuclear blackmailing by Chechen rebels in Russia in the 1990s. In all these cases, the agenda was very local. So that is why I'm quite skeptical about the capability of using deep fakes and misinformation to provoke a nuclear escalation. But, sorry, the last part in that context. But it's possible to imagine that one side could use a nuclear fake or misinformation about something like to demonstrate that that side is ready for a nuclear attack, for the first attack, to allow other side to discover its responses, capabilities, plans, to initiate command and control operations, to deploy weapons, to move them from their storages, and to discover their infrastructure with them. It would be quite a dangerous scenario, but this scenario, I think that it's quite possible to imagine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter, and your questions, sorry, your answers and your responses are, just perfectly timed, and you're explaining these things, all these issues in a very, very good way. So I'm absolutely enjoying it. I'm sure the participants are as well, because I can see so many people coming back with more questions. Faraz, you have a question? Please go ahead.
Yes. So it was it's sort of a follow-up to the question someone else asked and to what Dr. Peter answered. You said that the current amount of advancements in emerging technologies, they're not enough to fully shake up how deterrence works with nuclear weapons. But so with that context, my question is towards the psychological level of leadership decision-making. Let's say if a country does acquire or produce a very high-end, technologically advanced, high-precision weapon, a missile defense system or air defense system, on a psychological level of nuclear deterrence in the leadership and their decision-making. To what extent will that emerging or high-end technology have? Maybe not on the technological level of how well it can shake up deterrence, but on a psychological and decision-making level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faraz. I do believe that it depends on the concrete case we are considering in this context. Because the investment into the advanced technologies and emerging technologies, they might be huge, and they are related to military capabilities. And of course, it's a question about moving funds from other areas crucial for this, that, or this country. And the question is how effective the spending is and what kind of picture the political leadership might have. If we have a system, just imagine if we have a corrupt system without a proper moving of information and check and balances, and the independent judiciary and independent lawmakers, without a proper public debate about why the country should spend on that, on this, without independent inspections. So there is a huge space for misuses, for wrong information, for performing something that doesn't exist in fact. And the leadership might believe that a country might have advanced technologies, that they are a core part of weaponry and high precision and effectiveness of the weapons that that country or this country commissioned, have no doubt. And then there is a conflict, and then there is a way to show that it's not the truth. There is a very important aspect in this domain. As I mentioned before, artificial intelligence, cyber instruments, machine learning, information communications, and so on, they are very important for command and control, communications, intelligence, surveillance, and these integrated systems. It means that they are classified, and so a country might have a chance to show to others something that that country wants others believe. So it's like a virtual deterrence. When you show something that doesn't exist, and the other side would say, well, it's a huge advances and we need to react. But in fact, the country show that capabilities doesn't have it commissioned effectively, adopted effectively in the military system. And again, let me be back to the case of conflict in Ukraine. When Russia, before that invasion, invested a lot in electronic systems, in communication systems, in integration of command and control. And then what happened, that these systems probably didn't perform in the way that was expected by the political leadership. So it's important that the expectation might be high not only from outside country, but an expectation could be high from inside country, from the political leadership and from the population that would say, wow, we performed and we showed and we got so many sophisticated systems, but where the systems are now when we have actual escalation. So that is why it's a question about perceptions, and it's equally important to have adequate perception not only from outside country but also from inside country. And finally, this is also a very important aspect. This is a question about what kind to have an effective deterrence against potential adversaries, and to have constructive relations with foreign partners. A country might be interested in being very clear about what kind of capabilities it might have, including emerging technologies capabilities. At the same time, there is, I'll say, a risk that that country might use an ambiguity as a tool, showing something that doesn't exist or showing something that half true, half wrong. And by example, for instance, Russia, I would say that ambiguity is also a tool that Russia uses effectively against Ukraine, against the West. And here there is a dilemma between the ambiguity game and sending a clear message to create an adequate perception by the enemy about how risky it is to attack the country and how a country resolves this issue between ambiguity game and sending a clear signals. It depends on each case. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. So I'm going to close the list of questions for now, because we are very close to the 2-hour mark for this session. So what I want to do is give some concluding remarks, but before that, Dr. Peter, if you have some final remarks or comments, anything that you'd like to add?
Thank you so much, Haleema, for your perfect moderation. And also thank you so much for your remarks about the subject we discussed today. I'm very grateful to the audience and to the questions and comments that you provided in response to this title, to our conversation. I learned a lot from your comments, and I'm very grateful, and I'm looking for continuing this conversation, and I wish success to your project, and I believe that other conversations will be extremely insightful, and I will learn from these conversations a lot. So good luck, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peter. It was a very engaging, and if I can speak on behalf of all the participants, we learned a lot from this, and actually have kind of provoked us to learn more about these technologies and how do they impact in or what implications would we see of these emerging technologies in future. So with that, I just want to perhaps I shouldn't say conclude, but perhaps highlight a few things that came up during this session. So the first thing that Dr. Peter, when he began these technologies, there is still some debate about what the term emerging means, what emerging technologies or new technologies are. So again, there's still some perhaps thought process that has to go into how do we define these terms. Then the perhaps 4 major technologies that I could take from the discussion that were highlighted time and again, and also Dr. Peter also pointed them out in his lecture. The first was ballistic missile defense, then the high precision conventional missiles or conventional weapon systems that perhaps may also have a nuclear role. Then also the cyber attack or cyber weapons per se. Then there was also some discussion with regards to machine learning or artificial intelligence and how those can be integrated or are actually being integrated right now in the battlefield. Then if I want to point out 2 major takeaways from this session. The first one would be that these emerging technologies are creating more complexities, more challenges in context of dealing with real life battlefield situations. And the other takeaway is whether we want to reach a conclusion right now if these new technologies, emerging technologies, have replaced nuclear weapons, or perhaps nuclear weapons have decreased in their significance in context of the national security policies. That's not the case right now. Just like Dr. Peter had pointed out in his lecture, that this is perhaps still some years off, but that doesn't mean that these have any impact on deterrence. They do. For the choice of a better term, they perhaps can act as force multipliers. So that's where we are right now. Thank you so much to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to moderate, and also it was a pleasure hosting this session. Thank you so much again to Dr. Petr Topychkanov. It's over to you, Faraz.
Thank you, Haleema. Yes, again, I want to thank Dr. Peter again for taking time out. He's a busy person. And I want to point out that an interesting part of research, of being an academic, is that you always want to keep asking questions, and there's never enough time. So my apologies if someone's questions got left. But Dr. Peter's work is very interesting, and there's so much to explore there. So if you want to follow his work, his publications, you can. He has his profile and his list of publications on the SIPRI website, and then you can see him. You can just keep track of his work on Twitter as well. So be sure to do that. Thank you, Dr. Peter, for all the emails back and forth and for talking with us and taking your time out. Now, to the participants, just a few housekeeping points. And Dr. Adil, please feel free to add anything if I forget something. Tomorrow's session will be on with Mr. Bruno Tertres on nuclear deterrence and proliferation, specifically in the context of the lessons from Ukraine. And that is at 2 p.m. Pakistan time, 2 to 4. So be sure to join us for that. And then you have to join about 30 minutes before so that we can let everyone in and we can figure out any technical issues if there are any. And I'll reiterate what Ms. Isa said in the last sessions about the punctuality, because it makes it, one, is respectful to the speaker, and it makes it easier for the organizer and the moderators to let people in and keep a track of who's coming in. And because the attendance is marked, and if you're not there on time, you might be let in, but all that is recorded on the attendance sheet, that who's coming in when. So that will, play a part, and those who aren't attending all the sessions as communicated to the participants in the email, that will affect your continued participation in the other sessions. So be sure to be mindful of that. That's it from me, unless I'm forgetting something. Dr. Adil, Ms. Isa, if you want to add anything. I think not. Okay, so I think that's
nothing.
It.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So that's it for today, and we'll see everyone tomorrow. All right. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you. Bye.